Representative Pearson, over the years, much has been written and said about the ways Dr. King's legacy has been whitewashed, stripped
Mhm,
of its true meaning. How should we be remembering Dr. King's message and legacy in
mhm.
2024?
We must remember that Dr. King uh, gave his all for the belief in democracy, for the belief in the value of every person, and that it came at the cost of his own life. Speaking about love, speaking about truth, speaking about hope and possibility cost him his life. And the whitewashing that has happened, that has tried to neuter the legacy of Dr. King and many in the civil rights movement, to say he only cared about, that one speech, I have a dream. He only cares about the content of your character, right? Not the color of your skin. And I see white supremacists who retweet that and say that, and we'll be saying it in just a few days as a way to say Dr. King didn't care anything about color. Dr. King didn't really care anything about race. He just wanted people to care about the content of others' character. And they failed to remember that this black man was killed by a white supremacist in Memphis, Tennessee, because what he was advocating against was racism. What he was advocating against was the caste system of America that tells its citizens of color that they do not belong. What he was advocating against was the value of human dignity. And if it wasn't controversial, then why was it that at that point in his life when he was assassinated, very few people were actually supportive of the movement? What I believe we have a responsibility to do in this moment and this time as we remember the legacy of Dr. King is to realize that he was beaten, realize that he was incarcerated many times, realize that he was called out of his name, realize that he sacrificed so much, and Mrs. Coretta Scott King sacrificed so much in order for America to be its best self by talking about love and hope and what was possible. And that got him killed. It didn't get him celebrated. And so now we have this day where people get time off, but they want to only remember one speech, but they don't want to remember the speech that he gave only 1 year before he was assassinated on April 4th, 1967. He was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. But that in 67, he gave a speech about the three evils of America, about racism being an evil, about capitalism and its exploitation being an evil, about militarism being an evil, that we can spend more money on war than we can eradicating poverty. And when Dr. King started to talk about economic justice and the need for people to have the resources to have housing and to have food and to make sure that they were treated as citizens and had dignity, once he started talking about the changing of the systems and a love ethic that was strong enough to break down those barriers and those walls, those in positions of power stopped listening. And those who marched with him before, when he just wanted to have integration, when he wanted to make sure that people could sit wherever they wanted to in buses and go to establishments without white and colored signs, people were okay with giving out those pieces of symbolism. But when it came time for true economic and social transformation of the country, he lost a whole lot of support. And where we must be in this moment and in this movement for justice rooted in love, we must advocate for the creation of a movement, the propulsion of this movement of justice that lifts up everybody, particularly the poor and the disenfranchised. We have to, in this moment, in this time, as we remember Dr. King, we have to remember that we have to fight to change the systems that are oppressing 140 million poor and low wealth people. We have to change the system of white supremacy. We have to change the system of white patriarchy that is killing us. That's what we have to remember as we remember the legacy of Dr. King, not just how great of an orator he was, but listen to the words that he was speaking right before he was assassinated in Memphis. He was talking about an economic boycott of popular brands now like Coca-Cola. He was talking about a transformation and a reformation of our society and the way that it is structured so that we will no longer have a class of people who are being pushed and relegated to the bottom, but rather that we have the investment in everybody's full potential and not just those at the top and not just those who are white of skin.